The disrespect for Bo Nix and the Denver Broncos has reached a new level, and I am here to finally put an end to the madness. I just want to get right into it and bring in this Twitter propaganda from FanDuel Sportsbook. It's their way too early 2025 quarterback rankings, and I have problems with this list. Serious problems. First of all, there are just some wild scenarios here that FanDuel has drawn up. The first one, Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback of the Los Angeles Rams. That one's almost comical. We've got Matthew Stafford as the quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers next year. We've got the Tennessee Titans sticking with Will Levis despite having the number one overall pick. We've got the Saints sticking with Derek Carr despite almost all reports indicating that they're going to move on from him. Several just crazy scenarios here. Justin Fields to the Jets, but those are not anything in comparison to the disrespect being shown to one Bo Nix. Apparently, he is the 20th best quarterback in the NFL, or would be the 20th best quarterback in the NFL next season, according to FanDuel. And that is behind guys such as Kyler Murray, fellow rookie Drake May, Sam Darnold, Geno Smith, and Caleb Williams. That one is probably the most laughable of them all. I know people are going to say, all right, Gage, well, if you think you could make a better tier list, then why don't you make one? So I did. And I think, first of all, the most important thing is to actually split it into a tier list and not just do a numbers ranking system. Also, I don't think it's fair to put rookies into that equation, considering that we haven't seen them take a single snap in the NFL. I know that a ton of people out there would have thought it would have been crazy that Caleb Williams would be the lowest ranked rookie quarterback from last year on this list, but here we are, and that is exactly where we are at this, because that's just what happens. It's a different game from college to the pros. So I want to go ahead and explain this tier list here for each of these quarterbacks. It's loosely based off of Marcus Whitman's tier list that he does his quarterback rankings on, and I think it's a really good tier list, so I kind of adapted my own version of it. Some of these tiers are going to be split into two categories: veteran players who already have their ceilings capped, and young players who are still developing that could potentially rise up the ranks into a higher tier with due time. These other guys, we already know who they are as players, so they're going to stay where they are in their respective tier unless they make a significant jump forward or a significant jump backward in the case of some of these quarterbacks. I have it split up into 6 tiers. The first tier are clear backup quarterbacks in the NFL. Guys that you do not want as a starting quarterback for your franchise. Guys who would be the worst starting quarterback in the NFL if they were given the opportunity to start. Tier 6, clear backup veterans with ceilings capped. We have Daniel Jones, we've got Mason Rudolph, we've got Cooper Rush, Aiden O'Connell, Gardner Minshew, Joe Flacco, Tyler Snoop Huntley, we've got Skylar Thompson, Jacoby Brissett, and the worst quarterback in the NFL, no joke, Deshaun Watson. Then you've got some guys who are clear backups, but they technically are still at a point in their development where they could rise up and maybe become fringe starters. And that's Spencer Rattler, we've got Malik Willis, and we've got Will Levis. And these rankings on the tiers are in no particular order. So I'm not saying that Daniel Jones, for example, is the best tier 6 veteran backup, and I did say Deshaun's the worst, but most of these rankings here, despite them being separated into tiers, are in no particular order in the tier rankings, if that makes any sense. So these are all guys that I just don't think are starting caliber quarterbacks in the NFL. Spencer Rattler, obviously very physically gifted. Will Levis has some nice physical traits to him. Those guys technically could maybe develop into fringe starters. Same thing for a guy like Malik Willis, who does have some good physical traits. As far as these guys down here in the clear backup veteran tiers, we know who they are as quarterbacks. We already know that these guys are not starters and probably are never going to be starting caliber players in the NFL at this point in their careers. Moving into tier 5, and that is the fringe starter tier. And once again, I have that tier separated into developing players and veteran players with their ceilings capped. These are fringe starters, nothing more, or young quarterbacks with a 1-year buffer to showcase talent to maybe move them up into the next tier. And for the veterans, we've got Kirk Cousins, who just completely fell off the map last year, dealt with the Achilles injury his last year in Minnesota, had the shoulder injury last year in Atlanta, and really was just never the same player after that. Kirk certainly could move up into that next tier. I think he's probably the best in terms of these tier 5 veterans, but still, man, a really tough fall from grace for Kirk Cousins. We've got Derek Carr, kind of a similar situation as Kirk. One point in his career, he was higher on this list, but now I think he's kind of settled into that veteran backup, maybe low-level starter type player. I just don't think a team is going to be willing to invest in Derek Carr long-term anymore after what we saw from him in New Orleans these past couple of years, and the injuries are starting to catch up with him. He had one of the most injury-plagued years of his career last year. You've got Jameis Winston in there, a guy who on his best day could be up there and maybe even tier 3, but on his worst day is down in the clear backup tier. So I think it's kind of fair to settle him in there in that tier 5 ceiling cap fringe starter veteran tier along with Andy Dalton. And I think it's now fair to put Justin Fields in that category as well. I think he's the newest entrant into that category. I would say he used to be in this tier 5 developing tier, the fringe starter young developing players, but I think now we kind of know what Justin Fields is as a player. Great dynamic athlete, but very limited in terms of a passer. So I think it's fair to settle Justin Fields down in that tier. We've got our tier 5 fringe starter young players who are still developing that could potentially rise themselves up into the next tier. And we've got Bryce Young, Caleb Williams, and Anthony Richardson in those categories. Bryce Young is the guy who is probably the best position to move up into the next tier. I thought that at the back half of last year, Bryce Young was playing some exceptional football. He really was. He showcased why the Carolina Panthers drafted him with the number 1 overall pick. Caleb Williams, again, he's my lowest ranked starting level rookie. Obviously, Spencer Rattler was a rookie last year, but Caleb Williams, my lowest starting level rookie from last year. And I don't know, man. Caleb Williams has been very underwhelming in the NFL, and he's struggling with picking up the speed of the game. He's struggling with cadence, with snap counts. He's struggling with spitting the play out in the huddle, and reports out of Chicago indicated that was an issue for Caleb all year long. The physical talent for Caleb is without a doubt there, and I do think that if he's able to get some of these issues under control with Ben Johnson now in the building, a stable offensive mind, that he could certainly move up into that next tier. But right now, Caleb Williams is a fringe starter. He is one of the bottom tier starting quarterbacks in the NFL, but he is still in that developmental tier where he can get up to that next level if he develops his game. And it's kind of the same thing for Anthony Richardson, where we finally got to get almost a full year sample size of Anthony Richardson, and it was very much a mixed bag. He would give you those highlight level plays, but he would also give you some really low level turnovers that just kind of made you scratch your head. The accuracy for Richardson is all over the map. So I don't know, man. I think he's going to get one more year. He's very much falling into that 1-year buffer where he's going to get that opportunity next year. If he doesn't develop, then I do believe the Indianapolis Colts are going to move on from him. Let's go ahead and now move into tier 4, and this is just one that I have some veteran players in. I didn't really have any young players that I felt fell into this category. That is the tier of decent starters. They're veteran quarterbacks with their ceilings capped. They're clearly starting caliber quarterbacks in the NFL, but they've reached a ceiling, or they're at a point in their career suggesting that you may not win a championship with these quarterbacks. And Sam Darnold, he probably, if you had asked me to do this a little bit before the end of last year, he would have been higher on this list, but those last couple of games that he had against Detroit and the Rams really brought him down a tier. Sam Darnold was just a replacement level player when he needed to showcase his greatest strengths. And last year in the regular season, we saw Sam Darnold really establish himself as a quality starting level player, but like quite a few other players that I have on this list, they are ranked lower than they really should be because they don't deliver in the biggest moments. And that is Sam Darnold in a nutshell for me, despite him really playing some really good football in the regular season last year. I think it's now fair to settle Kyler Murray into this tier as well. There was kind of that element of unknown with Kyler Murray, especially after being removed from that ACL injury and Cliff Kingsbury no longer being there. It just felt like Kyler Murray and Cliff Kingsbury never meshed together. It felt like, Kyler just needed somebody else, a new fresh mind as an offensive play caller. They bring in Drew Petzing as the offensive coordinator with head coach Jonathan Gannon, who's obviously a defensive mind in his own right, but Petzing was able to bring in that West Coast offensive system. And Murray has his moments, certainly, where he can be a higher tier player. He can maybe be up in that tier 2 quarterbacks who elevate their team. I've seen him do it at various points in his career, but last year, even when he was healthy, we just saw that level of inconsistency with his play. And he's been in the NFL long enough now that I think we know definitively what Kyler Murray is as a player, and he's a decent starting quarterback, but he's probably not going to take you to championship level play. And same thing with the last two quarterbacks that I have in this tier 4, Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers. At one point in time, they very much were quarterbacks that could take their team to championships. They're both Super Bowl winning quarterbacks, but at this point in their respective careers, I just don't think that either one of them are championship level quarterbacks. Russell Wilson, we saw it all play out here in Denver. Took too many bad sacks in key situations, still has that beautiful rainbow deep ball. He still does some things well. I still think Russell Wilson is a starting caliber quarterback in the NFL, just like I think Aaron Rodgers is still a starting caliber quarterback in the NFL. Both of them did some good stuff last year, despite not having the greatest of situations around him, especially in the case of Rodgers. Russ had a pretty decent situation around him, but in the big moment, he obviously collapsed, especially in that playoff game against Baltimore. The old Russ from Denver started to show up to the point where I do believe the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to move in a different direction. And I don't know if there's another team out there that's going to commit to Russell Wilson. Same thing with Aaron Rodgers. So I think it's fair to settle them in to this tier 4 starting quarterback tier. Now we move into where things get a little bit interesting. And spoiler alert, we've got Bo Nix in tier 3. And once again, tier 3 is split up into veteran quarterbacks with their ceilings capped and young quarterbacks who are growing and still have potential to be great, who could move into this tier 2. And spoiler alert, there's my tier 2 right there. Quarterbacks who elevate the team around them, really take their game to the next level. Let's go ahead and talk about this tier 3 though, and I want to remind you guys, this is in no particular order, and despite them being down here in separate categories, and for some reason the image didn't save, but Michael Penix is also in this tier with Bo Nix and Drake May, but they are in the same tier as these quarterbacks up here. These are guys that just have their ceilings capped. We know what they are as players. They are firmly in this tier 3. But Bo Nix, Penix, and Drake May have the potential to move up into this next category. These guys are pretty much solidified into this tier 3 category. And to define tier 3, good quarterbacks who can get the most out of a great team and give you a shot at a Super Bowl as long as the team stays great around them. And the veterans who are firmly established in that tier for me, again, this is in no particular order. We've got Jared Goff, Dak Prescott, Brock Purdy, Tua Tagovailoa when healthy, Jordan Love, Baker Mayfield, Trevor Lawrence, who I think is one of the most overhated quarterbacks in the NFL. I see people saying that Lawrence should be ranked in like the bottom tier. That's ridiculous. if you pay attention to what's going on in Jacksonville, the coaching was an absolute disaster down there, and their ex-GM Trent Baalke failed to surround Lawrence with a solid roster. They had some good pieces, but they did not have depth, and when guys inevitably got hurt, including Trevor, all of the warts on that roster got exposed. Additionally, I don't think Doug Peterson was getting just enough blame for how bad things were in Jacksonville. That's not to say Lawrence was free of blame. I think potentially Lawrence could get up to that tier 2 if he actually did play to his expectations at the level that I know he's capable of playing at. But right now, I think it's fair to settle him in that tier 3. But I know there's going to be a lot of people out there saying that I have Trevor Lawrence ranked too high. And same thing for Geno Smith. I think he gets a lot of hate as well, but the Seahawks were just a complete disaster last year offensively. Ryan Grubb was not a competent offensive play caller. DK Metcalf had a career worse year. Tyler Lockett finally looks like he's hit that age barrier. Jackson Smith and Jigba look good, and Geno and him developed a really nice chemistry. I think that Geno was one of the guys carrying that Seattle offense last year, and he deserves a lot of love. But let's talk about our quarterback, Broncos country. Let's talk about Bo Nix and why I have him in tier 3. And spoiler alert, obviously, you guys saw it already. We've got Jaden Daniels up here in tier 2, quarterbacks who elevate their team. And I think Bo Nix actually did elevate the Denver Broncos last year. I contemplated putting him up in that tier 2. I almost did. But the reason why I can't do it quite yet is because I do think Jaden Daniels has separated himself and has put him a tier above Bo Nix. That's not a knock on Bo Nix, but it's more praise that should be heaped on Daniels. Daniels was able to elevate that Commanders roster all the way to the NFC Championship game. That roster, if it had been led by any other quarterback, would have probably been an 8-win roster at max. The things that Daniels is able to do physically with his arm, with his legs, his ability to throw with anticipation, his ability to dissect defenses, it's just on that next level. Now, Bo Nix does a lot of those same things really, really well. But you have to call it for what it is. Jaden Daniels is a more physically talented player than Bo Nix. Again, I'm not knocking on Bo Nix at all. I think Bo Nix is outstanding. That's why I have him at the top of this young quarterback list that can become great. I just think that Jaden Daniels deserves his flowers and he needs to be up in that next list. But let's talk about why Bo Nix is so high up on this list. Bo Nix is excellent at throwing with anticipation, timing, and accuracy, especially in the short to intermediate areas of the field, which is exactly where Sean Payton likes to attack. He also showed that he has a better deep ball than he gets credit for, and way better athleticism than he got credit for coming out of college. I think Bo Nix has probably the best situation around him to succeed in terms of stability with offensive play caller in Sean Payton. They're hopefully going to get some more weapons around him. The offensive line, easily the best out of all the rookie quarterbacks that were out in the NFL last year. So that's why I have Bo Nix ranked so high. Drake May, I thought displayed a lot of good stuff as well, but Bo Nix did it at a more consistent level and a higher level than Drake May did. And then Michael Penix, he belongs in this tier as well, but we didn't really get much of a sample size from Penix aside from those few games that he started. Bo Nix has the best chance out of all the young quarterbacks, not named Daniels, who's already there in my opinion, to get into this tier 2 and maybe in up to this tier 1, quarterbacks who are the best of the best, guys who elevate their team. He can get there. He's got, in my opinion, the best chance to do it. And again, I just feel like Daniels is already there. Some may disagree, but I was higher on Daniels coming out of the draft last year than most people. It's on the record here in this channel. Jaden Daniels was my number 1 quarterback. And yeah, that's the only thing that separates it for me. They're both young franchise quarterbacks. I cannot state that enough. The Broncos have their quarterback in Bo Nix, and the Commanders have their quarterback in Jaden Daniels. But other guys in this tier 3, again, all these veteran players, they're pretty firmly locked into tier 3. Let's go ahead and talk about tier 2. where I do think Bo Nix can get very soon as next season. This is the great quarterback tier. These are quarterbacks who elevate their team, who you would expect to win a Super Bowl in a 10-year window at their current level of play. The reason I didn't put Bo Nix at this list is because I think he needs to take his play just to that next level before I could say his current level of play would take the Denver Broncos to a Super Bowl. But the quarterbacks that I have in this tier are Jalen Hurts, who we saw put the Eagles on his back in that Super Bowl. He won Super Bowl MVP, and yes, the defense obviously completely dominated up front, but offensively, they asked Jalen Hurts to put the team on his back, and he very much did that. Matthew Stafford, another quarterback who is very much, in my opinion, overhated. He's a guy that I still think is a top 10 quarterback, can make all of the throws, is an elite special talent. Even in his older age, I think Matthew Stafford can still get the job done, and in the right situation, could very easily win a Super Bowl. We already talked about Jaden Daniels and why I think he belongs in this tier. CJ Stroud, the situation around him in Houston last year regressed big time. The offensive line regressed. A lot of his weapons got hurt. At one point in the year, Tank Dell, Stephon Diggs, and Nico Collins all were missing time. Diggs and Dell both suffered season-ending injuries. So it was just a tough situation that CJ had to account for, and still he was able to take his team to the divisional round of the playoffs. He did that by putting the team on his back. CJ gets a lot of crap, but he very much belongs in this tier in my opinion. And Justin Herbert is a very controversial player. I still was thinking about putting him into that tier 1, but like I talked about earlier, some of these quarterbacks can play like a tier 1 quarterback in the regular season, a tier ahead of them in the regular season, but fall back to earth in the postseason. And we've seen Justin Herbert do that twice now, and it's to the point where I can no longer put him in that tier 1 best of the best elite quarterbacks anymore. He's a great quarterback. He's very physically talented, and I do think that he elevated the roster around him. He did, but I still question deep down if Justin Herbert has that clutch gene in him. If he has that assassin gene, that I'm going to effing kill you gene. These other quarterbacks who are ahead of him, all of them have that gene. I just don't know if Justin Herbert does, and we've seen him just falter and collapse in big moments, time in and time out. That's why I cannot put Justin Herbert in this tier, and I know the same argument could be made for Lamar Jackson, but Lamar is just too damn good, man. You can't not put him in the tier 1 elite tier. Quarterbacks who give you a shot at winning the Super Bowl every year, regardless of roster talent around them. I think that Patrick Mahomes, yes, I know that he's a guy that gets a lot of hate here in Broncos country, but any quarterback list that doesn't have Patrick Mahomes ranked as the top quarterback in the NFL is just objectively wrong. Josh Allen, man, he's also a guy that has been let down by talent around him. So, by definition, does he belong in that elite tier? I don't know, but obviously we can look at Josh Allen and all the traits that he possesses and say that he's an elite quarterback, and he has put his team in position to win. He threw what should have been a game-winning touchdown to Gabe Davis in that AFC divisional round against the Chiefs a few years ago, and the defense had that epic collapse with 13 seconds left. There was nothing Josh Allen could have done about that. You then think about in 2023, the game against the Chiefs, Josh Allen had another elite game, and they ended up collapsing. Last year, this past year, 2024, I do believe that Josh Allen did have a poor game in that championship game against the Chiefs. So I know that there's going to be, again, some detractors with pretty much all of these rankings. Not everybody's going to agree with anything that I say here, basically, because that's just the way that society is. But I do believe Josh Allen belongs in the tier 1 elite tier. He gives you a chance to win a Super Bowl every year, regardless of roster talent level. You've got Joe Burrow and you've got Lamar Jackson also very much belonging in this list. Those are the 4 top quarterbacks in the NFL, the elite cream of the crop. Tying this all back into Bo Nix, I still think Bo Nix can very much get himself up into this tier 2. He could maybe even get himself up into this tier 1 eventually, but he's just going to have to take that next step in his development in order to get there. Jaden Daniels, for me, has already taken that step. I think this is a much better list and a much more objective ranking list than whatever this garbage that FanDuel released. All right, Broncos country, I know plenty of you guys are going to disagree with some of the stuff that I have to say here, so let me know where your disagreements are and let me know where you guys think I got this list right. I am very curious to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comment section below. I would love to hear from you as always. Be sure to leave a like on this video as well as subscribe and ring the bell so these videos appear in your notification feed. I would really appreciate it, guys. Those are both free and easy ways to show your support. Helps tell YouTube's algorithm to push us out, and it helps us get seen by more and more members of Broncos country just like you and me. And until next time, guys, I'm your host, Gage Madrid, saying peace out.